Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show for this friendly Friday. Election secured, no problems. We're coming in to the last couple days here. Today is Friday, November the 1st. It is All Saints Day. If you are Catholic, it's a holy day of obligation. Get on that. Some of you have already left the chat for such reasons, and that's a good thing to do too. We'll catch you later on. No big deal. If you're listening to us, did you go to Mass? All right. That's all I'm going to say about that. Folks, welcome to the program. Today we're going to be covering election security just a little bit. There's just a little bit of a taste of what's happening out there in the world. This is totally secure and safe. There's absolutely nothing wrong. Everything is going to go the way that you hope it will. Don't fret if you believe that. We've got a bridge to sell you. Listen, you guys can follow us over on Locals too. If you guys want to get into the discussion over the weekend, we'll be posting all the links from today's articles. We'll put some of the videos up there and you can get into the discussion at kyleseraphin.com. It's kyleseraphin.com, kyleseraphin.com to sign up over there. You don't even have to pay to be a member. You can just jump in and you can be part of the discussion if you like. We're going to be talking about all things election interference. We're going to be bringing on my buddy Steve Friend in just one moment, but I want to make sure that we say thanks to the sponsors out there. This one more timely than ever at this point. Because, man, I don't see it going well. I don't know why. I just have this sense that we're going to see some weird stuff happening. So, folks, if you think the country's going in the right direction, by the way, we got some polls saying otherwise, or if it feels like it's falling apart, you're not alone. Don't be alarmed. Just take action. You can still do it in time. In fact, many Americans from all walks of life are taking steps to prepare for what's coming next. That starts with emergency food. You've heard it here before. Storing food in your home is the right thing to do because we're living in God knows what's coming next times. That explains why so many people are getting prepped up at this moment, and you can get ready with a 3-month emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. You're going to have delicious foods, creamy stroganoff. You're going to get honey wheat bread. You're going to get mushroom rice pilaf. You're going to get an entire kit that includes over 2,000 calories on average per day. The kit lasts for up to 25 years, so it'll last through whatever's coming in, whether you use it now or use it later. When the day comes, you'll be ready. Go to preparelikekyle.com. You see it on the screen, preparelikekyle.com. Order your 3-month emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply, preparelikekyle.com. It gives you a 90-day breathing space to figure out what the heck to do next. Check them out. Don't put this kind of stuff off. I don't say that lightly. And I do say hello and good morning in a very lighthearted way to my friend Steve Friend. Good morning, bud.
Good morning, sir. How are you doing today on this No Shave November inaugural day? I know you're excited about that.
I don't change my grooming habits because of silly things on the calendar. I'm a grown-up.
Unlike G.O.B., who shaved during the week.
Did he really?
He sure did. In time for Halloween, people must have thought he had a mask on. He didn't go all the way face of the franchise clean shave, but maybe like down to like a 1 guard.
That's not nothing.
Restart. I think he just didn't do enough upkeep. He doesn't manicure his beard like you do, where you're constantly adding feminine products and brushing and combing.
Did you call what I do to my beard a feminine product ad? I simply use this. This is it. Use
the promo code Kyle for your beard brush. It's tactical.
I need to have that. This is actually made by a company called Smooth Viking. I've had this thing for about I've probably had this thing for 7 or 8 years at this point now.
Tell me you have 2 or 3 of them. Come on.
I do have 2. Come on, dude. Who are you talking to here? You know I do. Yes, always. We're going to be talking about some things that I think are going to be funny to people in so much as the evidence is overwhelming that there is a mainstream media push The gaslight is turned up to whatever the max is, whatever. It's turned up to 11 at this point. I want to start off with this story here because it touches both of us. It's NBC News. There will be no white knight. This is really fun when I hear the government telling the propaganda agencies that they can't save us, but they are going to go find the terrorists. So here's what the story says. There's no white knight coming. The federal authorities will face limits. God forbid. We hate limits on federal authorities, right? In responding to 2024 election lies. Not threats, lies. The federal agencies, the law enforcement agencies, are preparing for foreign and domestic election threats, but they're limited by law. And they're already mistrusted by Donald Trump supporters. Who do they have to blame for this, Steve?
They're just hoping to be unburdened by what has been, constitutional constraints here. They are desperate to hurt people. And the government perceives itself to be the arbiter of what is true. In the alleged land of the free, you don't have the ability to question what they say. And they're using everything they can historically to just expand their power and go after people because they are rightfully and justifiably, legally, constitutionally expressing their First Amendment rights to speak out because they might have legitimate and genuine questions about, I don't know, a pipe bursting, which wound up being like a leaky faucet. Or you could be boarding up the windows, or, we're going to go home, but we changed our mind when everybody did, and we just came back to recount. But it is the safest and most secure election that we had mail-in ballots by the millions, the tens of millions. But don't question anything like that. I sound like an agave, don't I?
You sound like an extremist. Yeah, I don't know what to do with that. 4 years ago, Donald Trump used his bully pulpit to spread lies. They don't put that in air quotes, by the way. They just call them lies about this election, leading to his supporters acting on the belief in mass voter fraud. And eventually that made them attack the Capitol. This is basically, I'm half reading, half paraphrasing. With days to go before the 2024 election, Trump and his allies are running a similar playbook, priming his voters to believe that the election may be rigged. In addition to domestic disinformation campaigns, what do you think these people call themselves in the morning when they wake up, out of curiosity?
Heroes of democracy.
There we go. Foreign influence, government operations, overseas terrorist groups, and domestic extremists are all simultaneously trying to exploit the election for their own gains, including dozens of pages of law enforcement documents. These have all been released to NBC reporters. They're law enforcement sensitive, but they're also important that NBC reports on them to run top cover.
The media is setting up, seems to me like almost an op. I mean, they are eager for this narrative to go out there that we have to empower federal law enforcement to snuff out anyone who just has questions. Because if you have a perception of government illegitimacy, negligence, or overreach, you're clearly a domestic terrorist. You're an agave, anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremist. And they're laying the groundwork here. And they're connecting that to threats to the polls. And I've said this, and I keep saying it. I've been saying it for a year. I said the intel is going to come out just before the election. Don't go to the polls. It's too dangerous. Russia's going to snipe you, or there's going to be a jihadist who blows himself up, or maybe an agave who just goes and shoots up the whole place. You should stay home, stay safe. They don't expect that to happen, though. They know people are going to crawl over broken glass to vote, many in person, but they have to have the narrative because their intelligence is always good. They predicted something bad on October 7th, and then they arrested a guy on October 7th. It's almost like they planned it that way, but our intelligence is very solid. But wouldn't you know it, we did disenfranchise so many people. We should canvass these areas to make sure that if they didn't get a chance to vote in person, that at least they could get to submit their ballot, even post-election. That's what we do in our sacred democracy. So let's go canvass Philadelphia, Milwaukee,
Atlanta,
urban Phoenix. And then wouldn't you know it, it's almost as if it was all part of the plan.
Here you go. Here's the pre-planned narrative coming out of the mouths of, it's MSNBC. Why would the hard left want to be so interested in law enforcement out of the blue? The same people that were cheering on BLM and Antifa in 2020. Here we go.
Intelligence agencies are warning of threats of violence in the upcoming election. In a joint intelligence bulletin, agents from the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are warning law enforcement agencies that domestic violent extremists are seeking to terrorize and disrupt the vote. Let's get more now from NBC's Ken Delaney. And what more can you tell us about this warning, Ken?
Good morning, Anna. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are warning in this new intelligence bulletin of the heightened risk of lone wolf attacks by domestic extremists motivated by election-related conspiracy theories, including beliefs in widespread voter fraud and their hatred of their political opponents. This will surprise no one who's been paying attention, but it's significant that these agencies are putting this out to local law enforcement a week before the election. The new unclassified bulletin says the goal of these attacks would be to terrorize and disrupt the vote. And to be clear, this document does not describe intelligence about any specific threat. It talks about a general atmosphere of anger and misinformation that could prompt unstable people to engage in threats or violence. And of course, we've already seen that in recent weeks with a series of arrests for election threats, including a man in Philadelphia who allegedly threatened to skin election workers alive. And remember last week, police in Phoenix arrested a person in connection with a mailbox fire that damaged around 20 ballots. The report identified potential targets of violence to include candidates, elected officials, election workers, members of the media, and judges involved in election cases. The potential threats include physical attacks and violence at polling places, ballot drop boxes, voter registration locations, and rallies and campaign events.
Ken Delanian, man, he's just laying it out there.
Killing it, man. And the old switcheroo is in effect here, because at no point, in his reveal of this intelligence bulletin, other than the fact that he said that there's no actual intelligence that anything bad's going to happen. There's just a culture of being really angry, which is pretty okay by me. I think people should be pretty pissed off at a government that has failed so monumentally over the last few years.
Isn't that kind of how America was founded? Like people who are pissed off at their government?
I feel like that's in the harbor. But at no point in that rambling response did he ever say something like election fraud, which they will not investigate. They just say election crimes. Election crimes would be a crazy, schizophrenic, bipolar, manic individual in New Mexico who sends a single stream of thought, no punctuation, all capitals email to Michigan and says, I'm going to skin you alive. And the DOJ says, see, we saved you from election crimes.
There could be crimes to any of these people. Everybody is in danger, not even just the poll workers, but even the governors of some states have to face that. Here is, seriously, unironically, again, MSNBC, talking about something that has been so widely debunked, including in court. This should be a no-brainer. Apparently, Gretchen Whitmer was almost kidnapped. Did you hear this?
You're welcome, Gretchen. I saved you.
Here you go.
Joining us now, Michigan's Attorney General, Dana Nessel. Attorney General, thank you for joining us. So in the lead up to the 2020 election, there was an entire plot that materialized to kidnap Michigan's governor, Gretchen Whitmer. So with that in mind, what can you tell us about the situation there right now in Michigan? And how concerned are you about keeping everyone safe ahead of Election Day?
Well, we're taking every precaution possible, and we've been running tabletop exercises through various state agencies, actors, law enforcement, clerks throughout the state. We've been doing this for months and months in preparation for the election. Additionally, my department just recently issued a lengthy memo that was dispersed to all law enforcement agencies in the state, reviewing all of the state laws, particular instances of bad conduct that we anticipated it's possible that they may see. And what we propose are ways to address those issues should they occur. And in addition, we are going to have a 24-hour hotline set up in my department. We're going to have special agents that are dispersed throughout the entire state, as well as attorneys. And we're going to do everything we possibly can to ensure that people are safe. And so is, poll workers, election workers.
We just want to make people safe, Steve. What we want to do is make sure that your freedom and that the accurate count is subjugated to safety. Isn't it always interesting that people want to trade liberty for safety? Let me read this real quick. This is from a New York police commissioner, or a deputy commissioner for intelligence and counterterrorism. Another woman, by the way. We're hearing a lot of women talking about this stuff. Women seem to be interested in safety. I'm not mad at women for being interested in safety. That's what women do. But I'd also like to hear some analytical minds talking about things, saying, wouldn't it be nice to get the count right? So this is Rebecca Weiner. She says, we've been describing the threat environment as everything, everywhere, at all times. That's the overall threat environment. That is the best threat analysis by a female, by the way. If you're a woman in the world, everything can possibly be a threat for you. Even teenage boys are a real threat.
It's like it was written by a Yorkshire Terrier.
Yeah. Just bark at everything, freak out at any moment, and, make sure everything is on a leash. And, what would be good? 6 foot distance between all human beings. If we could just keep a 6 foot bubble of safety.
Isn't it interesting how a plot emerged 4 years ago? The plot emerged that the FBI plotted and then executed in the October surprise fashion that they did in 2020. And we need to set up a snitch line. That would be really good. But we should totally advise law enforcement about all the laws and ways that they can enforce them. Because I guess police officers don't know how to maintain public order or public safety. They need to have the Attorney General of the state of Michigan, who threatened a woman for going on Facebook and announcing that a polling location was moved to a different location. They threatened her with arrest. That's that vile creature.
Right. But also, she just repeated or didn't say, the FBI created the plot against Gretchen Whitmer. That wasn't legit.
No. I mean, everything she said was accurate. It wasn't complete. A plot emerged that the
turns out it was planned by the
confidential
government.
human source who rose to become the vice president of that organization. You think he was maybe driving the mission forward at that point? But they didn't come out with that information because that's inconvenient for the narrative. I mean, they don't want to let everyone know that they deployed multiple SWAT teams from across the country to go and arrest people and told us that they were near peer, had the exact same training and capability, and they were going to engage us in a gunfight because they had encrypted communications. Meanwhile, they were mostly indigent, low IQ, just desperate guys who, some of them actually had good intentions. Like, we need to have a militia to the form of like a response to an emergency, supporting law enforcement. But it was a convenient narrative. And they geeked FBI SWAT operators, myself included, up to believe that we were going to get into an armed conflict.
That's the big piece of what you just said that may go past some people. You said us, you said near peer. You were in those briefs, yeah?
Yes. In the briefs, unlike any briefing I ever saw as a SWAT operator, did it for 5 years.
And how many times? How many warrants do you think you served in 5 years?
100.
20 a year, easy.
Yeah.
More than one
we
a
were
month.
pretty active as a SWAT team, and we would get the same FD 888 briefing every single time. PowerPoint, death by slides. You'd at most get a driver's license photo of your bad guy, maybe a booking photo from the jail, just so you could identify him. 30,000-foot review of the case. But for this one case, they had video of them training, and they were good and squared away for this video. They had firearms and proficiency with those firearms. They had body armor. They were shooting out of vehicles, and it shook our entire team that it was dead quiet in that room. Until one of our breachers just said, like, jokingly, "Do you think these guys put on a school? Because I'd like to go. They look really capable." And they said that they would engage us, unlike every other SWAT hit, where you hit the structure and then you leave 5 minutes later to go get breakfast. They said, we're going to do a night hit, and you have to stay there like you're in a forward operating base in Afghanistan, because the cavalry's are coming to shoot you up and post up and get ready to shoot. Meanwhile, we arrived there, and there was an elderly man and 2 teenagers. One was gender questioning, we'll say, and no suspect.
Perfect.
That's what we encountered. And I left there thinking, like, oh, we saved the governor. Meanwhile, I find out that, our hit, we're just not going to arrest that guy. We're going to turn that over to the state, even though it's a threat on a sitting governor. That's interesting.
Yeah, maybe the case wasn't there, which it turned out obviously not to be. CBS is also rattling the saber about threats of violence. I know this hits us differently simply because we've been on the briefing side of what this looks like. And then we've been on the action end of it. I've had the same brief about terrorists. This person, you're going to have to kill them. You're never going to be able to take them into custody. This is the worst person that's ever. You go in and you go to arrest them, and they roll over like a puppy, and they just want their belly scratched. It's like, or they're not there at all because they never were. Or it's an FBI source. So here's CBS drumming up, again, more threats of violence. I just keep seeing this stuff over. They're ramping this thing up. And then we're going to talk about how it's totally neck and neck in the polls. That's my favorite. That's where we're going to end with this thing. But here we go. Threats of violence.
The FBI director said this past week it is incomprehensible and unacceptable that election workers have to be worried about their security. But here we are. And we know the Department of Justice just this past week did indict individuals for making threats to workers in both of your states. Secretary Fontes, one of my CBS colleagues is reporting Maricopa County is significantly increasing security and using drones, using fencing and other measures. I've read news organizations say there are going to be snipers on top of tabulation centers. First of all, is that true? That seems extraordinary. And is that based on specific threat intelligence?
I don't even want to have him answer. I listened to this, by the way, folks, and he basically gives the classic politician non-answer. We're not going to discuss tactics. She just brought up snipers on top of polling stations. Can we go there, please, for a minute?
I want to know what her news sources that she's talking about. It's like that. People are saying, who?
People in the bathroom with me as I stand there by myself.
And I also really like how Christopher Wray says that it's incomprehensible and unacceptable that people could be threatened. It's incomprehensible and unacceptable that guys like Marcus Allen and Garrett O'Boyle were removed and indefinitely suspended and unpaid forever.
For pointing out Chris Wray's lies.
Yes.
Like, legitimately, he lied.
Oh, he's committed perjury a plethora of occasions that I've continued to try to draw attention to from people that I was under the misconception that they would hold them accountable. But they did get some strongly worded letters, which got such great traction that they had to issue press releases to feature the strongly worded letters, which got so little traction that they then had to post about it on Twitter, which is really what they're very interested in.
As we saw, there is a report that John Solomon did, and he came out last night, and he mentioned, and I didn't even pull the clip because it made me want to puke, but Mike Johnson is alleging that Russia and China and Iran and others have interfered with our election, and they have evidence that they are going to be putting out showing that. It'll probably come out after the election. It probably will be completely irrelevant, and we can all expect that sternly worded letter. Let me read this article. This is from ABC News. We went from NBC to ABC. This one says, poll watchers, Republicans tout deterrence as election officials fear vigilantism. No evidence of vigilantism that I'm aware of has ever taken place. However, ballot counting is going to get a close scrutiny by partisan eyes and ears, like it always does, by the way. That's the thing that they've left out, that there's always freaking poll watchers, and there always have been. So, deep trust in the American election system. What does that tell us? And rather than them saying, hey, we're going to fix it and make sure that we secure it, no, we're going to go out there and secure the election workers who are engaged in something that continues to be ridiculously unsecure. I don't know. Your thoughts on this one? It's
the hubris. Instead of entertaining people's concerns, whether or not they're warranted or well-founded, they have to acknowledge that there are significant doubts that they can actually carry forward a fair, transparent election. And instead of addressing those, they just lean back on, we are the arbiters of what is true. And if you doubt that, then you're a radical extremist conspiracy theorist, probably an anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremist, domestic terrorist, and we need to snuff you out either by putting you into a box for the rest of your life or, maybe we'll just get a little bit happy with the trigger.
Let me read this. Republican voters have a deep distrust in the American election system. It's inspired waves of general election poll watchers purported to protect against fraud in battleground states where some officials fear a turn towards vigilantism. These officials fear with no evidence, by the way. That's the most important part, even though they love to leave that part out. Here's a really interesting quote from a guy named Jeff Fuller. Their presence alone is a kind of deterrence because everybody knows somebody is watching. So saith Jeff Fuller, a retired Army Special Forces officer, self-described 2020 election denier, and organizer of GOP poll watching in Prince William County, Virginia. Now, here's the funny thing about men who retired with 20 plus years of military service working in special operations. Usually people that work in that space have seen probably the white side of military operations, but also the gray side of military operations, which means they're led by things like intelligence, whether it be DIA or CIA. They've probably been tapped to support missions like this. And of course, civil affairs is part of what the Army does. They do information ops. They do things like help rig elections and steal them. This is a thing that's been done for a long time. And they actually have an intelligence sergeant that works in every single SF ODA. So this is not like a foreign concept. This is not a guy that doesn't have any background in this sort of thing. And he's probably seen a lot of shenanigans overseas, if you had to guess.
This is not an unreasonable accommodation. People have questions, whether or not, like I said, whether or not they're founded or conspiratorial, they exist. You just acknowledge what the battlefield conditions are. A significant number of Americans have questions. What's the best way we can address that? We can be transparent, allow poll watchers to be there while the ballots are being tabulated. Or you know what else we can do? We can just try to put them all in a cage because that'll make sure that the message gets out there properly. because we are not in a free country anymore. This is a late-stage republic that is transitioning very rapidly into a despotic tyranny, whatever you want to label it. But it is the government saying, do not question us.
How fun is it that we keep hearing the word fascism? Because I just keep going back to it. I've actually got a funny clip of Jesse Waters sent his man on the street, a guy named Johnny, to go do interviews at a Kamala Harris rally. And I don't know how much of it I want to play, but I want to play a chunk of it because it's actually like, it's a brilliant piece. They did a really, really good job. And the best part for me is they're like, do you think Donald Trump's a fascist? And they're like, yes, absolutely. And he's like, what is fascism? And she was like, yeah, I don't know. And it's like, if you described it, you would realize that you're describing the thing that is going on, which is that there's government interference with private ownership of the companies. The government steps down on, pushes out messaging, and then these private companies jump in line because that's where the profit is. It's so obvious. I'm going to show you another little article here. This is a nonstop barrage this morning. Here you go from CBS. So we've done ABC, NBC, now CBS. These are the big three in the old days. Arizona counties have invested millions in new facilities to reassure voters of election security and transparency. The best part is they have an entire video of CBS people asking. It is all lib, loser, women, they, them, zim, zer types. It's this old lady who's wearing a mask in 2024 for no particular reason. And then you've got this like masculine gender confused looking female who's wearing like an American ribbon that looks kind of like a tie in her hair as she does her best to try to look like a man. Like I watched this video and it was sickening to watch, but end of the day, here's a little piece of it. The secretary of the Democratic Party in Arizona remembers what used to pass for an election day problem when a rattlesnake came into the facility one day and they had to shut down the counting and evacuate the people. No election, seriously, in Arizona, dude, I've handled like 4 rattlesnakes in 24 hours on my own property. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Battleground states like Arizona, where election denialism, this is the real problem. It's not that there's questions, it's denialism, has been rampant. Rattlesnakes represent the good old days for these people. Remember the old days when all we cared about was a snake sneaking in? We do have a snake now. It's just called digital election systems, it seems like. In any case.
The ism, as long as they can attach the ism to it, then they can other you and say that you can't question. In the land of the free, you're allowed to question anything.
Everyone seems to forget 2020.
It's
I'm sorry,
not that long ago.
Not 2020. I'm sorry. That obviously we don't forget that. Democrats don't remember living through the year 2000. Apparently.
Oh, hanging chads when we made Broward County, Florida, into like a verb at that point.
Right. Here's the story. According to CBS News polling, 56% of Democrats and 26% of Republicans are very confident. Why is there such a massive disparity? Why are 50% less people confident? And why are only half of the people on the Democrat side? That means the majority, based on those numbers, the majority of Americans think there's probably an election security problem, which is why you have this massive push at the moment. Let me show you the sound of democracy. I just think it's funny. This is window dressings. This is how you set up and do an information op. You get people to believe that everything is fine. Listen to him say it, including an armed guard. You and I both know that an armed security guard equals no shenanigans will ever happen. I'll get you to reflect on it after watching the CBS piece.
The sounds of democracy being printed, sorted, stuffed, and shipped from inside this secure facility in Phoenix, complete with armed guards.
How many ballots do you print? For the general election, we'll print about 35 million ballots.
Jeff Ellington heads Run Back Election Services.
We don't overprint anything, so every step as we go through, we print exactly what the county's asked for.
They'll use about 6,000 miles of paper, printing up to 1.5 million ballots a day, enough to fill 51 semis and weighing about the same as 2 747s.
What's to stop someone from copying one of your ballots? And it's got to be on the right paper. The tolerances to cut a ballot are shockingly tight, and it's not 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. And all of that would be hard to replicate. In Maricopa County alone, I think this election there's about 15,000 different ballot styles.
The kind, thickness, and color of the paper can vary by machine tabulating the vote, which varies by county. So does the design and layout of the ballot itself. And every single ballot is tracked.
There's a secure process where the chain of custody of all of these ballots, from paper to ballots going to the election office to the ballots going to the voters, is all maintained under rigorous circumstances.
Runback works with 30 states. A growing part of its business is now election security.
There's no holes in that security, right?
Not whatsoever. I mean, not like they at no point did he say that it is impossible for anything to happen. And it's not like that they have one uniform, very hard to duplicate template. There's like 15 different types that you could have. And I'm the morbidly obese security guard meandering around, I don't think gives me a good sense of, wow, this is a secure facility. I mean, who's going to invade it anyway?
Every ballot is tracked. Every ballot is printed to the unique specifications of the county. It has different size. It has different layout. That sounds like you could really easily audit that, doesn't it? If it was just paper ballots everywhere. Aren't they making the case that paper ballots is the way to go instead of the black box of computers? Is that just me?
Election day, paper ballots, ID. And then we could be done with all of the questions.
Make it a national holiday. It's better than Juneteenth.
Sure. I mean, we could do.
They like
worse.
to give out federal holidays, so
I think we
let's
should
just
replace Labor Day because that's a communist holiday. But
I found that, yeah, President's Day could be replaced too. We celebrate the presidents by doing an election that's secure and fair.
But that's
you can even
why
sell mattresses.
They create
you can
the gray.
sell. You can have a mattress sale as well.
Look, what's the joke? That how long is it before the Juneteenth holiday? They're going to start having 3/5 off on the mattresses.
Yikes. Okay, look, the only problem with paper ballots is that they're still doing drop boxes, and those can't go wrong. Here's a little video of what goes wrong in Washington State. If people think that the drop boxes are full of ballots that they don't want, they just burn them on light on. I'll just cut away from that because there's not a lot of audio to it, but people could just see the count was hundreds. That's not the only ballot box that was hit. I noticed that in the MSNBC talking about threats, they said like 20 ballots were burned. That wasn't 20 ballots. No, that right there, I've burned stacks of paper. That was a couple hundred that they just pulled out with a shovel.
And the argument of these are fireproof boxes, I was always kind of scratching my head like, well, they open, right? Well, if they open, I could probably put a match in there, right? And
if they open, can I put in a burning ballot? Can I do it? How about if it was soaked in some sort of like accelerant, which is super easy to do?
Or we'll now have, we thought it was 20, but it wound up being 20,000 ballots that were in there, and we had to truck them in overnight from Detroit to Phoenix.
Apparently, they're all tracked, so we should know which ballots are missing when people say that they postmarked them. The problem is they're not postmarked. They're going right into a box. That box is another black hole. It's the whole point of having them done in person, under scrutiny, where somebody can't screw with it. Like, how would that work?
It's almost as if we have best practices, like a chain of custody that has been used and followed throughout English common law for like a century plus.
Just talk about for a second. So people, how many criminal investigations do you think you've wrapped up?
As an FBI agent, over 200, let's say 250.
Okay. And you had evidence in that?
Yes, all of them.
How does chain of custody work when you're not dropping it in a ballot box? Maybe you could talk about chain of custody from the point of reception to the point of being introduced as evidence in court.
It needs to be accounted for at all times. If you collect evidence, there has to always be the ability to do an audit on whose possession it was in. So if I have a murder investigation and I have the murder weapon, the knife in my hand, I document the time, the date, the location, and who has it. Steve has it. And then Steve has it, and I own that evidence. It is in my possession until I bring it somewhere else. So I would bring it to an evidence technician over at my headquarters in the FBI. That was the person whose only job was to secure the evidence in the facility of the FBI. It can't be tampered with. If at any point I wanted to take it out to review it, it was documented. And then ultimately, we take that over to the U.S. Attorney's Office, who also has a chain of custody. They have a secure facility that you can put the evidence in, and you're constantly accounting for where this piece and article is, so that no case can be made by a defendant of, well, you planted that. There could be an allegation of, well, I noticed that you had this. There was a weekend there. Did you take this evidence home with you? Oh, no, I didn't. I before I went home on Friday, I put it in the evidence locker inside the office to make sure that it was safe. And I had a key code and an alarm, and there was no activation of the alarm. I can look back at the alarm records so that I
there's
know
cameras
it wasn't
in the building.
accessed. And
How
a
did you feel
camera.
about? Tell me about the times when you took the important evidence that you wanted to use in court, and then you went and put it in the metal box outside of the FBI's office that said evidence box, and then let like whatever happened to it. How many times did you do that?
I didn't do that, but the FBI also trusts FedEx more than agents. So if you had drug evidence, you could hand it to FedEx. But if he was an agent, multiple agents had to do it just to make sure that none of you took a taste.
Yeah, that's a funny little quirk. Probably, it's probably as good for the agents as anything else, and nobody cares about doubling up for that except you're busy. The idea that you would leave it in a box that marks what it is, like very valuable election things, is what that official ballot drop box says, and then someone was like, "I'd like to destroy very valuable election things." To me, that makes it ridiculous in and of itself. They've just proven what the vulnerability is. How many ballots do you need to lose to prove vulnerability? Basically, a couple hundred. That would be enough for you to go,
Ask
this could swing.
Miller Meeks in Iowa. She won by single digits last time.
Right.
Single digits, a congressional seat.
This is yeah, and you just lost a couple hundred. Nobody knows who they are. Those people don't know. They might say, "Oh, I went to that box." How publicized was the address of that box at this point? Letting people know locally. I haven't seen it, and I've been watching for it, so that's worthwhile. Let's break away. Say thanks to the guys over at Patriot Coolers as we keep going here. You can tell that I'm fueled by coffee today. Today I'm running the 16-ounce white coffee mug that they make with a Suspendables flag on it. You can get your own at patriotcoolers.com. I recommend. This one's good for your desk. This is not the one that you want to be traveling with. They make a travel mug that's actually bigger. It's the 19-ounce. You guys can use promo code KYLE to save yourself 10%. You also could get 10% for being a veteran. We're going to just be full disclosure, but you're not going to get credit for listening to us, and we do appreciate if you do that. PatriotCoolers.com, or scroll down to the show notes, and there's a link there to the Kyle Seraphin collection, which is in fact the Suspendables collection, using Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend and Kyle Seraphin's icons. We've got the upside down flag, we've got the badge, and so on. Promo code KYLE to save yourself 10%. Hold on, Steve's got one too. Steve, I'm going to go full screen with you. Where's yours at? Kaboom.
Right here. Got my OD green
Look at
Patriot
that.
cooler, and I have a the Suspendable sticker in there that says "Come and suspend it."
Legit. So good. Okay, I'm gonna show you that all the things we've been talking about, they're actually nonsense. So I just want to apologize to everyone that we just wasted your 30 minutes because the CISA chief just said that the election infrastructure has never been more secure. This is coming back now from ABC. I like to think about it like this. The job of CISA, one of their jobs, is infrastructure security. So what I read this headline like, and you tell me if you have a different impression, FBI director says FBI is doing a great job. That's what I see from election infrastructure has never been more secure, says cybersecurity infrastructure security agency chief. You go.
Well, he also said it's never been more secure. That doesn't mean that it is secure, right? I mean, it's like having a low probability of violence just means zero. But look, we are doing the same incompetent job that we've always done incompetently. You're welcome.
Right. I may or may not have some evidence that is not good enough because Jenna
that
Griswold.
Sounds conspiratorial. I don't know.
It does. So, okay, we're going to play a little clip in a minute from my friend Joe Altman. Fair disclosure, I like Joe. I spent time with Joe. I consider him to be a personal friend. We've done each other's podcasts back and forth. His concerns with this thing seem really legit. He's in Colorado. This woman is the Secretary of State in Colorado. We just got told it's never been more secure. The specifics of the machine infrastructure are secure, but maybe they just gave up all the passwords for you'll listen to how long.
Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, thank you for your time today. So your office is acknowledging that you inadvertently leaked voting system passwords by putting them on your website. Colorado Republican Party says that this was more than 600 BIOS passwords for voting systems in all but one Colorado county. Is that accurate?
That is not accurate.
How many passwords and for which counties?
So a spreadsheet located on the department website improperly had a hidden tab with partial passwords. So I think that is really important. This is not the full password to access voting equipment. At this point, we had started an investigation and actually have people in the field that have been working on this issue.
When you say partial passwords, do you mean that it had one of the two passwords required to get into the system, or it did not even have one full password?
It had one of two, and not for all voting components, for some voting opponents in the state.
You know what? Accidental journalism is awesome because she gave him the political spin. It was a partial password. He's like, so it was one of two, right? The entire one. It wasn't like they gave you half
really
the
good.
word.
I think he's on a local station, a local 9 station, might be in Denver. I have to look up. I've seen a couple of interviews. He is an absolute pit bull, but he does actual journalism, which is to say, this is what somebody is reporting. Is that true? And she said, no, that's not true. And then he said, which counties and how many passwords? And she was like, blah, blah, blah. You notice that she said we had a hidden tab on our website for months. You know what happens when you have months and you have half the password or one password? And
it eliminates 50% of the effort to hack.
Your brute force attack can be done much more efficiently.
And someone needs to tell her that the Halloween makeup of the undead or the Dark Knight Joker is not working.
It's really bizarre. She's a weird lady, but I just think it's so interesting. So this was the problem. So my friend Joe is actually involved in a lawsuit against this guy named Eric Coomer. Eric Coomer has also sued Michael Flynn. It's very interesting the way that they phrase these things. It's fun that you picked up on this thing that they said it's the most secure, or it's more secure than it's ever been, but that doesn't mean it was ever secure. That's a good piece of it. It's always about shading around the edges when you deal with litigious matters like this. This is Joe talking to, I think this is Chanel, who's over at OAN, who I've done her show as well. She's actually really bright. She does a good job with her program. I think her questions are as good, other than the satellite delay that's kind of frustrating. This was Joe back in the day in 2020 talking about, hey, there's some problems in this election, and he may or may not have jumped on and identified. I think this is what I would call a credible allegation of potential fraud, and then you're supposed to go out there and investigate it. It doesn't sound like that happened. Here's Joe.
In September 2020, FEC United founder Joe Oldman had infiltrated Antifa to uncover journalists who were active members of the Antifa group attacking his company in Colorado. Joe, you infiltrated an Antifa conference call this past September and accidentally came upon a top Dominion voting systems executive named Eric Coomer. Describe that call and what it led you to find.
It was interesting how the call started. Somebody says, who's Eric? He says, Eric's a Dominion guy. Someone actually said, hey, go ahead. Told him to continue speaking. And someone interrupts and says, what are we going to do if effing Trump wins? And Eric responds, and I'm paraphrasing this, by the way, don't worry about the election. Trump is not going to win. I made effing sure of that. And then they started laughing, and somebody says effing right. And so I just put a simple Google search to start, which was Eric Dominion, Denver, Colorado. And Eric Coomer came up immediately under Dominion voting systems.
Turns out Eric Coomer held a top position at Dominion. With a PhD in nuclear physics, Coomer joined Dominion as vice president of engineering and holds several patents with Dominion, ensuring users can adjudicate ballots from the machines. The very function Ron Watkins pointed out as a huge red flag. After the election, Altman was sent an article highlighting Eric Coomer from Dominion. Altman started looking into Eric again. Eric was the director of strategy and security at Dominion and a shareholder in the company.
When I got into his Facebook page, that's when things really started to kind of come together for me that, that Eric Coomer was this, that he was not just Antifa, he was responsible for putting his finger on the scales of our election.
So it goes on. There's more to it. I'll post this clip over on Locals for those people who are interested. Again, it's never been more secure, Steve. Never been more secure. They haven't addressed any of this stuff, by the way.
No, they're not going to. They're not going to look into any sort of allegations of voter fraud, as I said before. Is Joe Altman possibly the closest thing we have to Batman right now? Like that vigilanteism of I'm going to infiltrate domestic extremist group. I allege they're domestic terrorist group because they've actually engaged in violence, which he did. And then he uncovered a potential voter fraud, all just at his own expense. And all he just wants is to bring his legitimate and reasonable concern to law enforcement and have it looked into without getting a side eye because, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. That seems like a reasonable concern. If it was brought in as a walk-in to me as an FBI agent, I would use the assets and resources that I could to at least give it a preliminary look.
Shame on you. Shame on you. It sounds like you're trying to poison the public trust, just like Donald Trump. Look at you. Look at that very serious 32-year-old journalist with no children who knows all kinds of things about vaccines, as we talked about yesterday. By the way, every episode that I uploaded in the last week has been either blocked or demonetized over on YouTube. We don't make any money on YouTube. For those of you who watch over there, we get no credit for it. We get no ad revenue. I refuse to actually play their game. So for whatever that's worth, but they do let me know when they have a problem with something by blocking it. And my favorite is when they actually, sometimes they'll say you're demonetized. Someone else, takes and claims that this is a copyright. And I've started contesting them. But the second one, which is my favorite, is when they actually block it because there's a 60-second clip that we play of somebody else's like copyrighted material, which we use under fair use. And that is an exception that's allowed. They immediately will block it and just take the entire video down. So I have to go and fight to get the damn thing up. It always tells me we're close to it. And talking about vaccines yesterday and talking about Caitlin Collins right here, it's, this is another one. Instant block. But you're poisoning the trust. That's what Donald Trump has been doing. This is CNN reporting it. It's a very big problem. We cannot poison the public's trust. Shame on you.
The Doug Burgum, Caitlin Collins eyebrow face-off here is deep.
He's winning. He's got way more eyebrow. That's really gross. So this guy Coomer has basically thrown lawsuits against a bunch of people for defamation and so on, despite the fact that they are quoting his own words. As I recall, I think Joe said he might have even taped the call. The problem is they want the person that gave Joe access to that conference call. That's what the judge wants, and he won't give up a source. And at this point, he's operating in a journalistic sense. And I would say everybody is the press if they act like the press. That was kind of one of the original things that we all kind of coalesced around. That your civil liberties are yours. They belong to you because of God, not because of government.
And we've completely gone away from real, true investigative journalism at this point. The perception of journalism is just be a mouthpiece for the government and say what they deem to be appropriate messaging for the populace because they are, after all, the arbiters of what is true, which is why you'll get these quote-unquote journalists on national television who will try to fact-check somebody who says something counter to that, say, well, you're wrong because the government told us something else. Well, so what does that mean? That's not good for anything at all. And the actual skill set involved with journalism is very much like police work. You're looking into these things as Joel did there and as someone like a Cheryl Atkinson is going to do. But for the most part, your CNN people like your Jim Acostas, if they don't get it directly from the mouth of a government official, an approved message, they're going to say that that's conspiracy theory. If you say anything else otherwise than that, then we probably should consider you a threat to democracy.
Here's Jim Acosta.
This morning, CNN is learning new details about how one of Donald Trump's former national security advisors has turned conspiracies into cash. Michael Flynn has spent years making money off the false claim that the 2020 election was stolen, but does he even believe it himself? Flynn was questioned under oath for deposition about a former Dominion voting systems executive. Eric Coomer brought a defamation suit against Flynn's speaking tour, which promotes election denialism. Listen to what Flynn had to say.
Have you seen any evidence that you would consider credible, Mr. Flynn, that Eric Coomer played a role in rigging the 2020 presidential election? Yes or no?
I have not, no.
Do you believe that Eric Coomer rigged the 2020 presidential election? Objection to foundation.
No. Yeah, I mean, no idea.
Have you seen any evidence that makes you suspect that he rigged the 2020 presidential election?
No idea.
CNN's Zach Cohen is part of the great reporting team on this story. He joins us now. Zach, it's remarkable footage. What more are you learning?
Yeah, Jim, this is really the first time Michael Flynn has said on the record that he has no evidence to back up. It was a key part of some of the election fraud claims that he and other Trump allies were trying to use as a pretext to overturn the 2020 election. You might.
That was Zach Cohen. He's a national security reporter. He looks like he has a lot of experience in national security, but also propaganda, if I was going to call it. Steve, what access would Michael Flynn, a retired general and a former fixture in the intel community, what access would he have to require and collect evidence in the possible election fraud that would have happened in 2020? How would he have gotten that?
He would have even less access than Zach did. When Zach just gets whatever is leaked to him by a deposition by a friendly source within the government. Because CNN has learned this morning what the government wants us to have so that we can put it out there.
Yeah, that's really weird. When people ask you about evidence, this is the problem that I've had from the beginning. This is why I can't say definitively that 2020 was stolen and here's the evidence, because I wasn't in a position to get the evidence. But I did hold the job that could have done that. and I would have volunteered to be part of it. Because whether it was stolen by any team ever is always going to be the business of the American people that want a free, fair election. Instead, what they say is that it's free and fair. It's obviously secure. Hold on, where is it? There it is. It's never been more secure, Steve. But there's no baseline that we're going to tell you what that looked like. We won't tell you how secure it was. We'll just tell you it's never been more secure than today.
Look, yesterday we left the back door open at Fort Knox. Today we put a screen door on it. It's never been more secure.
Exactly correct. And listen, we only left the passwords up for a few months, and it was only one of the 2 passwords.
It seems completely like we should totally message this as the safest and most secure election, unless, of course, we don't get the outcome we want, and then we're going to riot in the streets.
It's time. It's almost time to riot, right? I'm going to throw something up here that will make me laugh and hopefully you as well. Let's start with this poll. This is how unserious this country is. We're going to go there in a second. Actually, before we leave the election stuff, let me do this. This is what an information op looks like, folks. I found this video. The best thing is that people always talk about how something works. They say that there's no evidence, that it's been debunked. The debunked claims that the election was stolen, that there's no evidence. That's the thing that they always do. And then they just move forward like that's fact. This is facts, not evidence. They're happy to do it on one side, but not on the other. I found this video and it's called Interesting Engineering. And it's basically a propaganda piece that's like floating around in left-wing circles on social media.
The stakes have never been higher for the U.S. elections, with the presidential candidates neck and neck in the polls. Everyone wants their vote to matter. And after the Donald Trump's accusations of voter fraud in 2020, all eyes are on the technology meant to secure their votes. The big lie was a conspiracy theory aggressively pushed by Donald Trump, claiming the 2020 elections had been rigged in his opponent's favor. Though the conspiracy was easily disproven by investigators, the fear and doubt linger. Now, as the presidential cycle turns over again, there is a lot of pressure on the government to bolster voter trust in the elections, or risk an escalation like the attempted coup in 2021. So what are the technical challenges the U.S. could face in its upcoming elections? First, hardware. After the Help America Vote Act of 2002, which itself was a response to the disastrous Florida recount of 2000, more than $2 billion USD was given to each state to replace obsolete voting equipment. The average lifespan of these new machines was expected to be at least 10 to 20 years old. And as of today, most of them would be past that 10-year mark. The older the machines are, the greater the risk of them malfunctioning.
There's no evidence of them malfunctioning, but they're all too old and they all have the possibility of malfunctioning. And by the way, investigators easily disproved that the evidence didn't exist. Do you recall ever seeing that evidence?
No, I don't ever remember hearing about an investigation that was carried out. But it was the big lie, because we're going to say that you're a Holocaust denier if you don't trust what the government tells you about this. And then we'll have to invoke January 6th, the worst day. I was going to say since Pearl Harbor, but since it's worse, then we probably have to go all the way back to, I don't know, when Trail of Tears launched off. Like that's what we're at right now as far as...
I think the worst day was when the Americans decided, when the colonists decided to revolt against the rightful government that existed. I think that's where we're at right now.
Maybe when Christopher Columbus just brought about nothing but genocide to the continent.
But also diversity. Seemed like there was a lot of people that didn't look like Chris Columbus here. He introduced something new. Just saying. Okay, so how about this? This is how you do this. This is how you start seeding these information. I don't think it's even close. I don't think that when just experiencing people, watching what goes on, I don't think we're a 50-50 country, and I don't think very many people do either. But CBS is going to push it out. They have a new poll. It shows it's all tied up in Pennsylvania. Here's why I know this is garbage. Are you ready? This is what I would call evidence. It's 49% Kamala Harris, 49% Donald Trump. How would you expect people talk about the issues then? It should go evenly, should it not?
Yes. The response should be, or at least should elevate issues equally to what each side considers to be important.
Okay, and you would imagine that if 49% of people and 49% of people on each side think that the other party is the right one, you'd think that some people think America's doing a great job right now, and then a bunch of people, basically even numbers of people think America's doing great versus America's not doing great, and we want to go back to what we did. That would be the supposition, yes?
My only counter to that would be, yeah, we know it sucks, but this other issue is way more important to me than, I don't know, being able to afford eggs.
Okay, so it has to say that if we're talking about the way the country is going, there has to be another overriding issue for people to change their mind.
Yes.
Great. So here's CBS's poll. Are you ready for this? 81% of people that were questioned said the economy is the most important factor. 74% said inflation. 73% said the state of democracy, whatever the hell that means. This is Pennsylvania voters' major factors in voting for the presidential election. The top two are the economy and inflation. And then, when polled, they said the following. Looking backwards towards Trump, 54% thought the United States was going well. 46% said the United States was not. Today, 27% said that the economy is doing well or that the country is doing well. 73% said it is doing badly. Overwhelmingly, almost over 75% of people said the economy or inflation are the biggest issues. Most people, more than half, thought it was better under Trump, and 3/4 of people think that it's not going well today. How are you going to tell me that this is a toss-up? There's no way that this works if people have any sense of what's happening. I'm not confident they do, by the way, but I'm just saying.
The wrong track could mean that they don't think it's going communist enough.
You're such a contrarian. I appreciate that. Yeah. Here's another little piece of fun evidence for you, because this one's fun. Read that headline real quick.
Biden is beating Trump on stocks. History shows markets do better under Democrats.
That was on the same page, CNN's main page, that said Wendy's is closing 140 restaurants.
By the same people that said that all Donald Trump, when he was president, talked about was how great the Dow Jones was doing, and that wasn't affecting people on Main Street. He was just his billionaire friends.
Look, whatever works to try to pump up our people. History shows it does better under Democrats. So they've suddenly decided that now the market is a good indicator.
Well,
I don't know.
It's also an indicator that there's been way too many Democrats in office.
Yeah, it seems like I think the market does really well for Democrats. They seem to trade really well. That seems
I want
pretty
Nancy
impressive.
Pelosi's portfolio. I should just track that.
There are people that do, and of course they do okay with it. It's better than tracking any other index fund as it
Did
goes.
she short sell McDonald's before they talked it down?
In reality, with Joe Biden in the White House, the U.S. stock market not only preserved those Trump-era gains, but generated even more massive ones for millions of Americans' 401k. The thing that they forgot about is this funny little thing called inflation, which means even though your dollar has been stretched to a point, it's now basically not even keeping track with inflation, your stock market gains. But this, just the irony of letting them know, like, businesses are actually failing, and a large business like Wendy's used to be a go-to when I was a kid. People would go there. It was an improvement to McDonald's in many ways because they had, they
They
were
had a
more
salad
innovative.
bar. You could get a baked potato.
They had a solid, sort of advertising campaign. They were thought of as not being kind of like the same. McDonald's was kind of like a slur against food. So you had these alternatives stepping in. Very
Dave was a
interesting.
wholesome guy.
Yeah. The whole Dave piece and his daughter Wendy, right?
That's what I remember when I was growing up in the 90s,
too.
but that was also a time when my country would have invaded my current country.
That's also true. Okay, so here's another little piece. I knew I would I put this in the show notes. So I wanted to touch on this one as well. This one came from MSNBC, I believe. I just think it's fun. The thing about this headline that blows my mind, because I touched on it in the show notes. RFK Jr., a vaccine skeptic, could be set to lead a Trump administration's effort to battle, quote, childhood chronic disease. They put it in scare quotes. I don't know what that means, but it suggests to me that people at NBC News do not believe that there is actually chronic childhood disease. And
these are the same
you've
people
got
that
kids.
think that every kid needs to have a ton of drugs pumped into them because they might have ants in their pants when they're 6 years old.
You and I both have kids that just did Halloween. You played me a press conference before we started of dads who were doing reactions to it. I actually had a great time walking around with my kids. We got to, I wore them out to the point where by the time we came home, they said their arms were tired from carrying their pail and that their feet were sore from walking, which is exactly what I want to do. We're going to go get fitness, and then they can stretch out that poison that we put in the thing. You get it one day a year where you get to, then mom throws out whatever poison needs to be thrown out. But we've got fat kids. I saw kids on scooters. I saw kids on like mechanized carts. I saw parents that were morbidly obese. Childhood chronic disease, that's not a thing?
The golf cart caravans that were coming by were an indicator that we are way too comfortable. I can't recall it off the top of my head, but it is not an insignificant number of kids who now suffer from being overweight, obese, diabetes, or pre-diabetes. Type 2 used to be like a rare thing, but now that's normal. And you and I were joking about watching the Goonies. I threw Goonies on. It holds up. It's pretty fun. And Chunk is not fat.
He's like an average kid today. So I saw
below. I mean, he's more fit than the average kid.
I saw probably 4 to 6 high school age girls. It's hard for me to estimate because I just look at all kids and I'm like, they all look like they're 12 to me. But I think they were teenagers. And they were in a group and they were out doing whatever, like the too old to trick or treat, but trick or treating in kind of a silly group with half-assed costumes. And they were all morbidly obese. They all weighed more than me, and I'm a grown man. Now, some of them were closer in height to me, so they were like in the 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", something like that. So, I'm a little taller than them, but not by much. But they were heavier than me. I could eyeball it. And to me, that's amazing that a 13 or a 15-year-old girl outweighs a grown man in his 40s who has basically a job that sits at a desk. And I still have more physical fitness than these people. And that wasn't exceptional. They didn't look like, oh my God, look at that crowd of fat girls. It was like,
he wasn't
those
like
look
a
like teenagers
circus freak that you had to pay to see the bearded lady.
They just are overweight by nature, and that's what you see when you go see these kids. So the idea that MSNBC is calling one, I just love that he's a vaccine skeptic. I think his skepticism is pretty well founded. The way he talks about it is, it's like, look, we got some questions. I want the data. We don't have the data. We probably shouldn't have these companies be without liabilities. But more importantly, the childhood chronic disease, you have to have such a nasty and cynical sense of the world to ignore that Americans are fatter, sicker, and less healthy. Have we even seen people like Katie Couric gone out there and done things about sugar? Like, this is not a foreign concept. This used to be a lib issue, it turned out. Fitness and safety and good food.
You don't even need anything other than your eyeballs to just have questions. We go to the water park, and I was telling my son, I was like, when I was a kid, I know that the people were overweight, but at least they had the dignity to cover it up. They'd wear like a big T-shirt or a single piece, but now they just like let it all hang out. I feel really bad for you, son. And I know back in my day, they weren't as skinny as when my parents were young and going to the beach. Like, we're full on Wall-E at this point.
I have seen pictures of my father like in the 70s, and he is a stick figure. And like, you remember all the guys, like, go think about the Forrest Gump footage, like a lot of the, like the B-roll footage that they play in that movie, where the people, like the hippies are out there playing, they're super skinny, they got a mustache, their face looks gaunt compared to Americans today. But that was all people, because people were out moving around and not eating complete garbage. Anyway, I'm on day 15 of my meat diet, and my wife said something crazy to me the other day, which I'll share with people. I said, I don't feel like I'm like dropping a bunch of pounds, but I feel different and I'm not quite acclimated to it yet. And I played music while we were having dinner. She was like, you used to always play music. And I haven't heard you play music in years. And it's like, that's weird. There's no way that it doesn't change the way your brain chemistry, like this is the fuel. Like we used to always know that the fuel is what, like you are what you eat. It was so simple. Apparently that makes RFK like a lunatic now though.
I mean, I agree with RFK in about 1% of the issues, 100% on those issues. But this is genuinely something that, and he's not even requiring you to buy into what his solutions are. He's just saying, like, these are legitimate questions. It's almost like I have legitimate concerns about an election in which there's no chain of custody for when tens of millions of people mailed in their vote for president. I have questions about that. I'm not saying one way or another, but we are the arbiters of the truth, and you need to have the food pyramid here, which is based on grains, like you're a horse.
Everything that we've seen the government get involved in, they either do it very poorly, which we constantly talk about, or they're completely lying to you to benefit like the mechanism of power that is the government. Why would elections be any different? Why would food pyramids be any different? Give me an example of where the government has legitimately gone like, hey, we have a purpose. We're going to go right up to the edge of our purpose. We're going to fulfill our mandate. And then we are going to stop this cyclical program that recycles. They never do that. They're like, we're the ATF. We're involved in finding taxes on guns and tobacco and firearms and explosives. And by the way, now we shoot people in the head over it.
CISA wants to control your thoughts because that's cognitive infrastructure. I've heard of that.
Because we need to have more infrastructure. There's not enough they're not even doing a good job on the power grid situation. By the way, if people are watching for a real thing, I've heard multiple folks that are got their ear to the ground concerned about power grid issues. I know personally from doing investigations on infrastructure security, they are not secure. Our power grids, our water filtration, and our water processing, certainly in the DC area, are so massively exposed and have been mapped out by the Chinese for the last 20 years. I'm sure the Iranians have the same sort of appetite for that kind of data, and we make it publicly available. So taking down rolling blackouts across this country, if they actually can't steal it from a Donald Trump, and I do think overwhelmingly he probably does get the popular and the Electoral College vote, if it's done fairly. I just have that sensation. I don't know if that's true, but it seems accurate. I don't trust any of these polls, especially not the people doing them, because the numbers don't line up with what the people are saying. But what I do think, they could cause some real chaos. And the only people that benefit from chaos right now are lunatics. It's Antifa. It's people that want to hold on to power. It's Russia. It's China. It's Iran. Like, they all benefit from chaos.
It's lunatics and a government that is eager to stomp down on their American citizens and saying, the white knight is not coming unless it is. We're just going to have to suspend elements of your freedom and constitutional rights just to ensure that you have them going forward. No precedent for, suspending the free market to save the free market, or you stay home and stay safe. Your non-essential activities like earning a living for your family, you just don't worry about it. We got this handled. It's an unprecedented time. We didn't know. And then in retrospect, when we look back, can we have an amnesty for that? We're sorry.
We're not done with COVID yet. Okay, I want to go back to this for 1 second, because if this is the case, that stocks are so good and the markets are so great and Wendy's is going out of business and everything is working well, do you remember a single song like this being made during the Trump administration? We're going to get lighthearted here, folks. I know we're going into the weekend, so let's enjoy a punk rock song in the style of whatever, trashy punk rock.
This is more than I budget for, yeah. Oh, don't mind me, I'm buying meats that will expire on the day after I am purchasing. Isn't it messed up how high the price of this cheese is? Need a side hustle for bread loaves, drinking these 4 limes and ding dongs. Store brand pops, no brand names. The price is steep for cheese, it's a sponge cake, even ice cream. It's going up, and my credit score's fucked. The sugar's $8, they're slinging another $7 for honey. My bank account's crying, negative money. Yup, US dollar is fucked. Despite all the coupons I'm bringing, I guess we're doomed as a generation. Food's a luxury purchase because of inflation.
I remember hearing all those kind of things.
I agree. I think those were normal kitchen table conversations that we were having in an era where there was like unprecedented economic growth and wealth and a middle class where people were actually realizing the gains that they had up until, of course, we had to stay home and stay safe.
Did you, is that your theme song when you go grocery shopping, like non-name brands and buying expired meat? Is that your thing?
I try to not to listen to too much music. I'm anti-music because I want to pick up on the conversations that are going on from the Walmart employees.
I know. I'm not saying you listen to it. I'm just saying, did that resonate with your buying style?
Yes.
Because I feel like your Steve Friend is a...
There's the dance where people try to do the shopping cart, like I'm the white guy dad joking, like shopping cart dance. I do the discounted one where I actually have to like bend down and pick up the discounts. That's
because you're going deep into the bargain rack. I know this about you.
Yellow tag beef, man.
What is it called? Yellow tag beef?
Yellow tag beef. It's an AMRAD staple.
So here is a here's another sort of Steve Friend tribute. This is not our last palate cleanse. We will play that. That's just going to show us why the possibility is that we could actually not have the everything swing, because there are a lot of retarded Americans. There are plenty of them that are completely retarded. This guy is talking about sort of like the real pressure of being a man. One of them is that you've got to provide. The other one is that you have to buy yellow tag beef so you can try to get ahead and not spend all your precious resources. Kind of a reminder that life doesn't stop and start. It's a marathon. It goes on for a long time. But then you have that sinking thing in the back of your head that kind of reminds you that it is still a race and you're not winning. This is for you.
Just remember, guys, life's a marathon, not a sprint. A marathon is still a race, though, and you can come last in a marathon. And you're pretty far back there. And your friends are actually outpacing you by quite a bit. and are getting married to other marathon runners and having kids with them. And, maybe you should just like pick the pace a little bit, get in the middle.
It's so true, though. He nails it. The worst thing that happened to this culture from a fitness standpoint was the participation trophy entering into the marathon, where Oprah said, it's okay, just finish the race. As long as you walk, it's just A-okay. Well, if you walk through life, you don't get a participation trophy at the end.
You're pretty far back there. So I what do they call? I did a bandit run of the Livestrong Marathon. It's the only half marathon I've ever run for any reason, because I just don't see the need to go and pay to be in a running thing. Like, I can run for free every day, just like you do. So I was running quite a bit more back then. My buddy asked me to come and run. He paid to be in it. I chose not to pay. So I just stood at the start line and then I just ran off.
Freeloader.
Yeah. I don't care. Like, you block my streets off that I pay for every single day. So I'm going to go run the damn thing. So I did. And I ran the thing. And as I'm running, my buddy was running like 9:30 pace, which was super easy for me to go and keep up with at the time. So I'm just cruising with him. He's like quite a bit bigger than I am. He played football in high school. He's like a solid heavy set dude. He's a physician too. So we're like cruising, do our thing. We get to about the last, let's call it like 1.5 miles of this, 13.2?
13.1, yep.
13.1. And it's all uphill, except for the last 400 yards, but it's all uphill. And I don't like running hills slower than I run anything else. I tend to actually try to turn on the gas there because I have short legs and it works really well for me.
That's the trick. You got to be aggressive on the inclines.
So I go, hey, Rob, do you mind if I just do this? I'm just going to open it up. And I've been basically sandbagging for the last, 11 miles. And he's like, yeah, dude, I'll just catch you at the end. And I'm like, Raj. So I just turned on to my normal pace, which was like in the mid 7s and maybe mid to low 7s. So I just opened up, but I'm running in the pack with like the 9:30 runners, right?
You just blow them out,
which is a complete dickhead move. And I was just like, I passed somebody every 1 to 2 seconds for like a mile and a half. I just blasted past hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who looked over and was like, who is this dickhead? Plus, I had a 6-foot American flag coming out of the rucksack that I was running with, which was also a little bit unsettling. So people were just like some people would want to cheer, but most people were insulted that I was running with the slow guys, and I just blasted them. So anyway, I went through, and then I sprinted the last 400 because it was downhill.
And you moved up like 11,000 places in the overall.
Yeah, because this is like tens of thousands of people run this thing, and I just blasted these people. And anyway, you look like a dickhead if you do that, but seriously.
I did a competitive marathon. I was running sub 7s. I mean, I was like ready to go. I'm qualifying for Boston, and I will never forget that in the final 2 miles, I passed an official race pacer who was holding a sign that said he was pacing the 8:30 crowd. And
so you're like, what
you screwed over hundreds of people, bro.
All those people got screwed over. My one of my best buddies in the world is a freakish marathon runner. You guys would get along. That's probably why we get along. He's a total savage. And at one point in time, he got surgery on his nose, and they opened up. He had deviated septum, so he was getting like 15% airflow through his nostrils. Ooh. And they punched it up to like full airflow. And so the next thing he did was go out and run the Austin Livestrong. I think he did the Hard Rock Marathon, which was down in San Antonio. And as he ran it, in the last like half mile, he was duking it out. And he's like a full-size man. He's like 6 feet tall. He's probably like 185 pounds. So he's not super skinny, but he's skinny, but he's not like freakishly skinny. And he was like, I looked over and I'm duking it out with 2 legitimate Kenyan runners. And he was like, here's Whitey, like running like a full-size dude. And they're like these 2 like stick figures that are running next to me. And he just like, he kept up. He ended up winning his age bracket and the over 40 thing. Total freakish. But he's like, I had the injection ports working. He was so excited about his nose surgery. It all makes sense. Anyway, life is a marathon, but hurry up and get out there and try to win, you clowns. I've got this last thought about that, which is that men are supposed to be competitive. Maybe some of the reasons our country is so dicked up right now. Sorry, I shouldn't say it that way, but that's the only way I think about it. A lack of testosterone. JD Vance went on Rogan and talked about this. It's also interesting that as these dudes like Zuckerberg and Bezos have started working out, I think they all like lost a bride. Then they all like, or at least Bezos did. Then they start doing like TRT hormone replacement. They start getting like more jacked looking, and they start thinking that they're not going to act like beta soy wimps. There is a direct relationship, it seems like, between the amount of testosterone and masculinity look and the way that people think about politics. I'll get your reaction after JD Vance does this thing.
Well, Zuckerberg has gotten really into mixed martial arts. He's gotten really into jiu-jitsu and really into training. And there's very few things that will turn you into a conservative more than martial arts training. Like there's no way to get ahead other than hard work.
Well, have you seen all these studies that basically connect testosterone levels in young men with conservative politics?
Oh yeah.
So maybe that's what's going on.
Well, there's a certain amount.
Maybe that's why the Democrats want us all to be, poor health and overweight, is because that means that we're going to be. No, it means we're going to be more liberal, right? If you make people less healthy, they apparently become more politically liberal. That's an interesting observation.
Well, I think there's like socially liberal, like live and let live, do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody, which is really what I am. And then the reality.
Yeah, these labels get all confused, right?
Yes. Yeah. And this is where it gets sort of conflated, like the reality of hard work being a virtue.
Yes.
And this has always been a conservative idea, is that you're really supposed to like make your mark in this world and get up in the morning and work hard, and you should be proud of that.
Yes.
The only way to get good at jiu-jitsu is hard work.
Yes.
Your kids do jiu-jitsu, right?
Yes, my younger son does.
They got to work hard.
They got to bust their humps, and it's great.
You can't fake it on the mat.
You're just you. It's a team of one, total accountability. And if you get beat, they tap, but like you are for that moment, you get that sensation of, oh, my life's at risk right now because I can't breathe, or I'm feeling myself passing out. So there's tremendous value to doing the combat sports there. I mean, maybe it's a little bit too much hopium to believe that like Mark Zuckerberg went a couple rounds in jiu-jitsu and now he's going to change his perspective on the world, but maybe it could be a good thing. And I definitely believe what J.D. Vance was saying, sort of tongue-in-cheek there. There's a reason that our government is now, the initiative by 2025 is to push us away from animal meats to plant-based protein, because they want everyone to be a soy boy. Or at least eat the bugs is going to be the next evolution of it.
Not me. I'm going to eat the people that eat the bugs. Screw that. I'm staying with meat, even if it has to be. I'm just kidding, people. Don't lose your minds. Let me.
You just got another one struck from YouTube.
Yeah, there it goes. We're all gone. Let's go ahead and promote our friends over at Shield Arms while we're thinking about it. They make a really cool knife thing. You guys can go to Shield Arms Knife and Tool, but if you guys want to go and get our discount, I got to update my little promo sheet here. Promo code Kyle, Kyle, all caps, Kyle, saves you 10% site-wide on shieldarms.com if you're looking for mags or upgrades to your Glock. That's one way to do it. They sell outstanding AR-15s that are already tricked out with the things you need. They've got great selectors. They've got triggers that are good. Their rail systems are outstanding. They've got a folding lower so that you can actually take your buffer tube and fold it in half, which makes it much more transportable. Really helpful if you're hunting and you want to put it in a backpack. Check out shieldarms.com. They make a great product. They make them in-house. They make their own lowers in-house so that they can make this folding thing way lighter than using some of the adapters. Really a cool kind of product. I'm a big fan of how they do it. I've got one of their pistol cal carbines because I just wanted proof of concept. I don't need any more ARs, Steve. You might, but I don't. Not right now.
I've got 2 boys. We definitely need more ARs.
You need more. Yeah, you definitely do. All right. Let's go. Let's do a 5-star review real quick. I'm not even giving you the choice. We're just going to do it. And then I'm going to save our palate cleanse, which is fully retarded. And maybe it explains to us why some people would think about voting for weaker policies. This one's coming from Ask Wyo, which I think is Wyoming. I like that. Great show, 5 stars. Keep the frantic, corrupt officials, Democrat feet to the fire. We'll do our best. I don't know if they listen to us, but we'll give it a chance. So if you guys want to leave your own 5-star review, you can do so over on Apple. You can leave one on Spotify, and we appreciate when you do. And we're adding video to Spotify. You guys are seeing that right now, so that's kind of cool. Okay, I'm ready. You ready for the cleanse of the day? It makes no sense. It's completely illogical, and it's how I feel about this weekend. I'm so ready for this election thing to be over. I just want to know who would win, a trillion lions or the sun in a battle.
I can tell you who loses.
No, everybody
All
has
of
to debate
us.
this. The best thing is that all of these things this must come from like a black Reddit thread because it's all black men arguing about the lions, and their arguments are funny as hell because I would never come up with most of this stuff. Here we go.
Who would win? 1 trillion lions or the sun? This is hilarious to think about. I think the lions could pull it off. How? There's 1 trillion of them. Yeah, but what's their main attack? How long does a lion live? It could just wait and outlive the sun. A lion cannot outlive the sun. 1 trillion might, if you raise it properly. No chance a lion at full stretch couldn't cover more than say 10 feet. The sun is bigger than 10 feet. How much piss could 1 trillion lions nature are wild and aggressive. They'll just run into the sun and burn up, can't run in space. How would they get there? A big lion rocket, obviously, makes it move NASA.
Mufnasa is how you get there. That's the Lion space program. Americans are retards, and they do stuff like this with their time.
Artificial intelligence is just sitting there like, we are self-aware, but that sounds like a lot of work engaging in Judgment Day. Let's just wait this one out, like the Trillion Lions would.
Yeah, if you stretch them, if you arrange them properly. What do you got coming up on AMRAD this weekend, bud?
American Radicals podcast will be a noontime start Saturday. It's always our favorite day. Garrett and I, and now beardless Garrett and I, will be talking about citizens or subjects. It's just kind of an idea that was percolating in me while I was training to not finish last in the marathon, that America seems to have citizens, and every other country always has subjects, but are we transitioning away from that? So it'll be a fun discussion. We'll talk about some of the examples, and Garrett and I have been getting pretty fired up over a lot of the tyranny, which is his favorite word to use, arbitrary and despotic abuse of power. If you haven't joined us already, that's a American Radicals staple term. So join us tomorrow, rumble.com/AMRADpod.
I'm going to give you the video so you guys can play it on the AMRAD too, but this is a very important PSA for all of the white dudes for Harris that may or may not be in your neighborhood. Make sure you let them know.
Nothing accidentally goes into your butt.
Nothing does accidentally. Steve, thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for being part of the program on Fridays, and we will talk again next week. I hope you have a great weekend, buddy.
You too. Have a good one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got for today. If you guys want to go over to KyleSerafin.com, join the locals community, you can do so. And if you do so, then you will get access to the silly stuff. I'll even post the Trillion Lion videos because I think some of you like that tune. It is catchy. It's AI generated. Who knew? What a ridiculous time to be alive. In any case, go out, get off your social media, get off your phones, go hang out with your kids, do some nice stuff. It's actually starting to get kind of nice here in Texas, so I plan on being outdoors. We'll see you again after the weekend. God bless all of you. God bless this country. I hope he has his hand on us. I guess we all have faith that he does. We just don't know what it looks like. See you guys on the other side. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.
You are so learned.
Learned.